All eyes on Kylian Mbappe's very expensive ankle as Paris Saint-Germain sweat the fitness of the World Cup winner ahead of the League Cup final against Lyon and the Champions League quarterfinal with Atalanta. We have an update on that. Mauricio Sarri gets a well-deserved cigarette break as Juve wrap up a 9th consecutive Scudetto, while Ciro Immobile scores a hat-trick for Lazio to move clear in the Capocannonieri standings. Plus, Valencia hire a new manager, Villarreal officially present theirs, and David Silva says goodbye to the Premiership, all on an all-new Sports Burst starting now. Hello, welcome into Sports Burst. I'm Andres Cordero. Joining me on the show today, Eric Krakauer. Eric, how are you? Our first touch today is in Paris, where an early goal by Neymar, enough to see Paris beat 10-man Saint-Etienne on Friday, and that gives PSG its 13th French Cup. Everything you need to know in this match happened within the first half hour or so. Neymar scored in the 14th. Loic Perrin sent off just after 30 minutes for a foul that forced Kylian Mbappé to limp off with a sprained ankle. We now have the injury report on Kylian Mbappé. Paris releasing a statement confirming it is a right ankle sprain. There is damage to the external ligament. They put his recovery time at 3 weeks. That effectively rules Mbappé out of both the last ever Coupe de la Ligue final against Lyon and the Champions League quarterfinal against Atalanta, which is just 16 days away. Eric, considering Di Maria is also suspended for that quarterfinal, Mbappé out, Cavani gone, do you see Paris beating Atalanta?
Well, yeah, I think it's still a possibility because Atalanta has some defensive frailties that have been exposed by lesser teams than PSG. But I think that it's a completely different proposition without Kylian Mbappé. And you saw it in the second half of that Coupe de France final against Saint-Etienne, where it looked like PSG, yes, they were in control of the game for the most part, except the last 20 minutes where Saint-Etienne were just, throwing everything at the champions. But they will look like a different team going forward, one that didn't have the same sort of incisiveness as they do with Kylian Mbappé. And of course, that's normal considering that he is one of the top 3 players in the world. And if you take him away from any team, no matter what team that is, the team is going to suffer. But I was a little bit surprised at how differently they attacked and how toothless they became without number 7.
So the goal was already scored. It was Neymar, as you see there, off the rebound after a quarter of an hour. They did not score again for the remainder of that match, despite playing about an hour and change with a numerical advantage against Saint-Etienne. It is a cup final, so factor that in. Saint-Etienne, strong enough side to have reached that final. How does this change Paris's approach then to that match? Forget, Lyon, which is coming up in a couple of days. We'll have some time to talk about that. But looking ahead to the game against Atalanta, because it looked as though Thomas Tuchel was preparing this team to play in that 4-2-4, right, with all 4 of Di Maria, Icardi, Mbappe, and Neymar. If the other option is, say, Pablo Sarabia or a Choupo-Moting, do you still think they might go with that 4-2-4? How does that change the team?
Well, I had questions whether Tuchel would go with the 4-2-4 against Atalanta.
Put those questions out of your mind. That was the way he'd been playing all preseason matches.
That's
it was the way he played the cup match. So whether you think it was wise or not, he was going to play with those 4 up top.
All right, well, let me just say then that I'm not sure if it would have been the wisest decision. Gotcha. And perhaps the fact that he doesn't have Mbappe will make him rethink that formation because, and let me reference the game against Saint-Etienne. In the beginning of the game, I thought Saint-Etienne were very good defensively, very aggressive, perhaps too aggressive at times, but they caused some danger. They made PSG uncomfortable in those first 10 or 15 minutes. They hit a ball off the post. One went just ever so slightly wide. And part of Saint-Etienne's attacks came from the wings, where PSG have routinely been exposed when playing that 4-2-4. So I don't think that they'll play that way against Atalanta, particularly without Mbappe, because Mbappe, what he does is he tends to Neymar and Mbappe paper over those defensive cracks because, they're always going to create goal-scoring threats and very often put them away. You saw the first goal that they scored against Celtic in a friendly a week and a half ago, which was scored, within the first 45 seconds. And that's why I thought that the game against Atalanta was going to be a shootout. But now that you don't have Mbappe, I think it would be smart of Tuchel not to be, I don't think conservative is the correct word, but perhaps a little more pragmatic. And he won't feel the pressure, I think, of having to include those 4 attacking players in his lineup.
So just as always, the show is interactive. Post your comments to the Facebook chat. We'll get through as many of them as possible. Mo Sadi chimed in first with hello, soccer heads. I think it was a reference to hello, big soccer heads, which
big
is
soccer heads. It's
an unusual Eric Krakauer greeting. Do you want to explain what that is?
That was the name of my podcast years and years ago.
All right, Di Michelini, those types of fouls, referencing the Loic Perrin foul, there's sort of a multi-game suspension and a player fine regardless of the intent. He actually writes irregardless, which I refuse to read online, but apparently it's now in the dictionary. Irregardless made it onto the dictionary, so it's a proper word now.
I know, yeah.
The Queen's English.
Yeah.
The only issue there is I believe Loic Perrin is retiring. I'm not sure if it's confirmed, but I think he's on his way out, so multi-game suspension wouldn't really factor in here.
Right, this was his last game in the Saint-Etienne jersey, and, you know, he's not going to remember it fondly.
Sure. Juven Kurama, too bad he won't play regarding Mbappe against Atalanta. Wanted him to play, so when Atalanta crushed them, I wouldn't want to hear PSG fans complaining the reason they lost was because Mbappe didn't play. Brendan Burns, Sarabia is underrated. He will star in the Champions League. Brendan, he is, I don't know if he's underrated because we've been singing his praises for several seasons here. He was terrific at Sevilla last season, and I think he's good enough to start. And so this might be sort of, it's not a blessing in disguise. Having, of all the players you could have out, Mbappe is the first or second worst possibility for Paris, either he or Neymar, because they are game changers. But Sarabia is a very, very capable player.
Oh, yeah, and you said it. You and I, every time we do a PSG game, we talk about just how good of a player he is and how smart it was of PSG to go and get him. And he was fantastic in the Coupe de France in the earlier stages. I don't think he was very good against Saint-Etienne. He's been good when he started in the league and the League Cup. And I think he'll be an important player against Atalanta if PSG are to win that game. And Dre, I don't know if you were going to go and touch on this after this point about Sarabia, but I think it's worth noting that tackle, that Perrin tackle on Mbappe, really, I think, betrays the discrepancy in perception that fans have of an event that happens in a game. For me, it is a clear 100% red card, but when I read the comments on Twitter and on Facebook about this tackle, a lot of people saying that this is never a red, and I just can't understand how this is not a red card. A few years ago, a tackle just like this ended Steve Zakuani's career, the Seattle Sounder. So I don't get it. But if we can't agree that this is a red card, I don't think we can agree on anything that concerns soccer or anything else.
So it wasn't given as a red card initially, right? The referee saw it and gave a yellow to Perrin, then went to look at the monitor because VAR intervened. He took a look at it himself, the referee for this match, and then took away the yellow card, gave the straight red, which I think was also the correct decision. I don't have any problem with what you said there. That looked to be a reckless challenge. It puts Mbappe's health clearly at risk, as Mbappe now will miss 3 weeks and two of the biggest matches of the season for Paris. So no argument there that it was a straight red card. If you wanted a debate, you're not going to get it out of me. Jean-Kiel chimes in and says, honestly, this makes the game a whole lot more interesting. Atalanta already look dangerous, even more so now. I want to go back to that 4-2-4 conversation we were having a moment ago, and not because of the 4-2-4, but because even in a different shape, this Paris team, the way that Tuchel seemed to be headed, reminded me of the Real Madrid side that won 3 consecutive Champions League trophies. And that is a team that did not necessarily, monopolize possession, take control, and not allow the other team to play, but quite the opposite. Let the other team play. They just knew that they could outscore you. They would concede chances. They would just have more chances than you, and at the end of the day, more goals than you do, which may not be ideal to compete in La Liga, but could work in a short tournament knockout round style as the Champions League is, especially with games now as one-offs. And so I would almost say that maybe Tuchel was conceding the idea that, yes, we're going to have some spaces for teams to exploit, but that also means that I get to break out in free space with Mbappe and Neymar, players who thrive in that transition game. I don't know that they're going to necessarily move away from that, even in the absence of Kylian Mbappe, when you can just put in a Choupo-Moting alongside Mauro Icardi and maybe give Neymar much more of that playmaking responsibility behind those two.
Yeah, but you lose the ability to break into transition as quickly as you do with Kylian Mbappe, and I think that's one of the big weapons that he offers. Look, he's an exceptional player, a multi-dimensional player, and I think that if you reduce him to just his pace, you're doing him and the game a huge disservice. But there is no doubt that that pace offers a dimension, a dynamism to PSG's attack that they no longer have. They just don't. And you look at how many passes. You know, we saw that. I'm going to harken back to that incredible opening goal against Celtic, where Neymar, yes, he has a lot of space in the midfield, but the fact that he's able to thread the needle with a 30-meter pass to find a streaking Kylian Mbappé to score the first goal. Neymar now loses, I think, the ability to do that. So not only do you lose Mbappe's speed, but you take away one of Neymar's weapons, which is his ability to unlock a defense with a killer pass. And I think that's what really hurts him. And to your point about the 4-2-4, I completely agree. I think Tuchel's bet is, yes, maybe I'll concede 1 or 2, but I'll score 4 or 5. The thing is, I don't think you can score 4 or 5 now without Mbappe. And number 2, Atalanta is just not your normal opponent. That's a team that has a very similar philosophy under Gasperini. Yes, I'm going to concede maybe 2 goals, but I'm going to score 5 on you, maybe even 7.
Yeah, Atalanta will be happy to just trade blows with PSG, which are one of the few teams on the planet, I think, that would actually favor. That's going to have the pace of an NBA game, and I simply cannot wait for that. But we do have one other meaningful Paris match coming up this week on the 31st. It's the Coupe de la Ligue final, the last ever League Cup final in France, Paris Saint-Germain against Lyon. Sans Kylian Mbappé, Friday, 2:30 p.m. Eastern, the start of our coverage as PSG wrap up their domestic campaign. Beyond that, it's the Champions League or bust for the Parisians. Well, meanwhile, the Premier League wrapped up this weekend, matchday 38, closing out almost exactly as it had started, at least in the spots that matter, because Liverpool, City, United, and Chelsea started in the top 4, finished in the top 4. Leicester, Spurs, and Wolves will go to the Europa League. Only change there was Spurs moved ahead of Wolves into 6th. Although worth noting, Wolves are still in the Europa League. They could actually potentially win that. And down at the bottom, Bournemouth, Watford, and Norwich are relegated, and that means Aston Villa are safe and will be back in the Premier League next season. Bournemouth, Watford, and Norwich were in the bottom 3 going into the final round. They finish in the bottom 3, although the place is rearranged. It won't be much consolation for any of them. But Eric, the first thing that jumps out looking at that table, of course, is United finishing 3rd. It's the first thing that jumps out because it's the first full season under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, who had stepped in midway through the previous season, replacing Jose Mourinho. First campaign under him, Bruno Fernandes, obviously a big contribution as well, signing during the January transfer window. But Manchester United back on the podium in the Premier League. We've seen some false dawns, right? Under Jose Mourinho, they finished 2nd and then ended up firing Jose Mourinho, I believe, the next season after that. So is this a false dawn, or are United truly back?
Well, it depends what you mean by truly back. Are they truly back as a contender in the Premier League? I'm not sure they're there yet, but they're back in that they will compete for the top 4 spot. They're back in that they might win the Europa League, and they're back in that they may cause some damage in the Champions League, because if you look at every player pound for pound, they can beat just about any team. I think they need to make some defensive upgrades. They spent a hell of a lot of money on Harry Maguire, and I'm not sure he's worth it, and I think that most people would agree. So I think they need a piece or two in that back line to really make them a contender in whatever competition that they're in. But what's impressive to me about this story, Dre, is a turnaround under Solskjaer. Yes, we saw that manager bounce last season when he replaced Mourinho, and that was mostly him spraying the toxicity away with his happy demeanor. But after that, it became real when it came to the X's and O's and having to deal with a player who was clearly disenchanted with everything that was going on in that team. And I'm talking about Paul Pogba. Now, something has changed in Paul Pogba, and I think that is a major part of what has propelled Manchester United forward. I think one of those things is Bruno Fernandes coming in. I just went back to my Portuguese accent there. Bruno Fernandes coming in and sort of bringing in a different mentality, but also COVID affecting Pogba's potential departure, because nobody was going to pay the money that Manchester United were going to ask for. So I think he realized that he really needed to change his attitude, and when his attitude changed, man, his football started to flourish, and he reminded us of just how exceptional a player he can be.
So I would add to the Pogba conversation here that he had been dealing with some injuries previously at Manchester United, and I do think that a lot of the criticism directed at Paul Pogba by Premier League fans, by Manchester United fans, usually has more to do with the way the team is playing than the way that Paul Pogba is playing. What I mean by that is, if United didn't finish 3rd, if United were outside of the Champions League picture once more this season, I don't know that people would be feeling all that rosy about Paul Pogba, because again, because of his position, I don't know that he gets a proportionate amount of either credit or blame. It's wild to me, the entire career of Paul Pogba, post his Juve days, it did feel, especially at Manchester United, like he was criticized for things that probably had nothing to do with him. And so, again, I think the praise has more to do with United doing well than Paul Pogba doing well.
Yeah, I think that certainly affects perception. And I'll add another ingredient to that, and that is social media. So what social media has given us, especially when you have a player who is so active on it, is insight into their personal lives. Whereas before, when I was growing up, I mean, you couldn't even get to practice, right? You didn't see the behind-the-scenes footage, maybe 10 minutes of players stretching, and that was it. Now we get all this insight into a player's life, and that, of course, feeds our perception. Now, players were doing exactly the same thing in the past as Paul Pogba. Other players who are not as active on social media do exactly the same thing. But because we see Paul Pogba doing it, we think, oh, man, he can't possibly be as invested in Manchester United as me, the guy who buys the tickets to the game. And that's damaging, I think, to any player.
Comment here from Gino Fuentes, one of our producers. Can we give Bruno Fernandes an award? What award would you give Bruno Fernandes?
The Captain-Elect Award, I guess. This is the guy, yeah, maybe Save the Season. Mike Fuentes just whispered in my ear here. Save the Season Award is a good one as well. I mean, look, I knew he was a terrific player. He's the captain of the team that I supported. I was crushed when he left. But I said, you know, I did the rounds on different radio shows and on this show, and I said, look, this is the kind of player who can revitalize a team based on his attitude alone, because I saw it at Sporting. He managed to elevate a team that is mediocre at best, winning two cups, domestic cups last season, and I knew that he was going to change things around for Manchester United, but I could never even fathom that it would be like this.
Young Jay Swagger chimes in from left field. I would love to see Manchester City win the Champions League. It's not really part of the discussion.
No, my pick, by the way.
Well, yeah, it's very brave to go with arguably the most talented team after Paris Saint-Germain.
Well, hold on. It was at the beginning of the season, and yes, you're right. Still, not a brave pick, but a pick nonetheless.
Gotcha.
You know what it is? And I'll say it real quick. I'm sick and tired of people criticizing Pep for not winning Champions Leagues, as if everything he's accomplished with Manchester City and Bayern Munich counts for nothing.
Right. Yeah, that's a conversation for another day. Let's focus in on the Serie A for a moment, because the title race is now over after Juve beat Sampdoria 2-0 in Turin. They claim their 9th consecutive Scudetto. Maurizio Sarri wins his first. And I'd like to actually start with Sarri, because while being interviewed in the mid-zone post-match, Wojciech Szczesny handed him a lit cigarette, said, "You deserve this." Obviously, there's a lot of jokes about Maurizio Sarri, who will often pull on an unlit cigarette during matches from the touchline. But here's a guy who, at 30 years old, was a banker. Didn't make his Serie A debut until he was in his mid-50s. And now in his early 60s, he finally wins the Italian league title, having come so close with Napoli a couple of seasons as they were chasing, but ultimately fell short of reaching Juve. It's almost, if you can't beat them, join them. Well, Sarri did, and he's won with them. So what do you make of Juve's now 9th consecutive Scudetto and this first under Maurizio Sarri?
Well, number one, it's not surprising because it's number 9, and they have been a dominant force in Italian football. And I was a little disappointed that Lazio fell by the wayside after the suspension, after the return of SerieA, because they were giving Juve a real fight. And I don't think you can say enough about the job that Simone Inzaghi has done at that club since taking over. And I'm assuming he'll stay there because they're going to be in the Champions League. But after that, maybe he'll take over at Juve. I'm not sure about Maurizio Sarri's future at Juve, although it has to be said that what Szczesny did in that press conference really gave you some idea of the relationship that most players have with Sarri, which is a good one. And I know that was a question mark going into when he joined the old lady, that he has an abrasive manner, which didn't win him many fans at Chelsea, and there was some concern that maybe he'd rub Cristiano Ronaldo the wrong way, but that hasn't happened. The problem for Sarri is that they're not playing Sarri ball, the football that he instilled at Napoli, who, by the way, are playing a very similar brand under Rino Gattuso, who is a much maligned manager.
Ronaldo, by the way, scored the opener in that match. Bernardeschi, which I believe it was his first goal this season, scored the second. He's had an injury-plagued campaign, Bernardeschi. And then Cristiano missed a penalty in the 89th minute, which combined with Ciro Immobile's hat-trick against Hellas Verona, which included 2 penalties, that leaves Cristiano now 3 goals off the pace for the Capocannonieri, the scoring title in Serie A. with 2 rounds left. But we are talking about Cristiano Ronaldo, who once again is over the 40-goal mark for the calendar year. Ronaldo and Immobile both chasing Lewandowski for the golden shoe in Europe. I believe Immobile is tied currently with Lewandowski. So which of these 3 players do, I mean, obviously at a disadvantage, Lewandowski, his season is over. Which of these 3 players is going to win that award? And why is it Cristiano Ronaldo?
It's not Cristiano Ronaldo.
Okay.
It's Ciro Immobile, and that's because they're playing Brescia in the next game. Brescia are already relegated, I believe, or very close to it. They are a team in shambles, and I think he's going to be able to get a brace in that game and tie Higuain's record, which is unbelievable, but he has scored an awful lot of penalties. He scored 2 this weekend. Higuain scored only 3 when he reached the 36-goal mark, which is just for anybody who follows SerieA and Dre, very few people know as much about SerieA as you do in this country, is an incredible feat. And I'd like to see Immobile get that, reach that watermark, because he's just had a tremendous season.
He really has. And it's kind of remarkable that Cristiano Ronaldo is basically breathing down his neck down the final 2 rounds, because it didn't look like he would come close earlier in his campaign, but he's turned it up for the old lady. Now 3 different managers across these 9 titles for Juventus, as Richard Murray points out, always a constant in our comments. Conte, Allegri, and Maurizio Sarri, all suitors to the grand old lady. They just continue to win. Juve, they've done it once again for the 9th, and I don't believe anybody should be favored ahead of them this early. We haven't even finished the season yet, but number 10, they'd have to be the sort of odds-on favorites, especially in a transfer market coming up where Juve typically are able to outspend anybody anyway, cannibalize other teams from within their own league, but also may hinder other teams' abilities to get stronger, as effectively everybody is losing money in football. And that includes Barcelona, which is where we're going next down the final stretch of the show. In an interview this weekend, Barca president Josep Bartomeu admitted that Neymar and Lautaro Martinez are both probably out of Barca's reach financially. Said the club have lost some $235 million since March as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and tried to sort of talk up some of the things they've already done in the January, like bringing Pedri, bringing other players who have been loaned out, and promote players like Riqui Puig and Ansu Fati to the first team. But this sort of confirms what we already expected from Barcelona, is that they don't have the money to bring back Neymar or to lure Lautaro away from Inter, even at the quote-unquote budget price, which that already expiring clause in his contract for a buyout clause.
Yeah, and I was looking at the list of players that they have transfer listed, and it just seems like it's going to be very hard to get any of them to leave, considering that the wages that they're on. Look, this is what happens when you only have short-term goals, or at least you plan for the short term as opposed to long term. In fact, if you look at the teams in Europe right now that are in the most debt or in dire financial circumstances, they're mostly the kind of teams that don't plan long term. And Bartomeu has 1 more year to turn things around, because no, he won't be able to be a president, but I think he cares about his legacy at the club, and his legacy has been blemished by so many things that have been going on behind the scenes. But he's almost tempering expectations right now, because there's always so much talk about who Barcelona is going to sign, which player is leaving. I think he's trying to snuff out that conversation as early as possible. Yeah,
that's a look at sort of the future for Barcelona, and an admission that they're not going to be very active in the transfer market come when it opens up in the summer, although they've already done some things, as Bartomeu pointed out. But in the present, they do have that match against Napoli coming up, the second leg of their round of 16 Champions League tie. Well, Ronald Araujo has just suffered an injury during Barcelona's B's promotion playoff against Sabadell, and that leaves Quique Setien currently with 1 healthy center back. It's Gerard Piqué. Lenglet is recovering from a growing problem. Umtiti is out, so unless Lenglet can recover in time for that match, Barcelona could actually be forced to line up either Arturo Vidal again in an emergency setting as a center back, or Sergio Busquets. Would you be okay with either of those options against Napoli?
Yeah, Sergio Busquets played as a center back a few times for Pep Guardiola and did pretty well. Doesn't have the mobility.
Right,
but
Piqué and Busquets would be arguably the slowest center back pairing on the planet.
No, that's true, and that could be problematic. And Napoli are playing very well. I just mentioned Gattuso a few minutes ago, and he won the Coppa Italia with Napoli. We're going from strength to strength. They're still playing in Serie A, so they'll be more in rhythm, and that is a real threat to Barcelona. But I still put my money on Barcelona in this one, and that's because they have Lionel Messi. But there's no doubt that they have problems at the back, and he's going to have to shore up Quique Setién, that midfield line.
Okay, last touch here. We only have about 40 seconds, Eric. So Valencia have hired a new coach. Villarreal have already presented their new coach, Unai Emery. But Javi Gracia will take over as the new manager of Valencia. And your thoughts on Los Che are?
Very capable, but it's not exactly inspiring, is it? Which goes sort of hand in hand with everything that we've seen from Valencia recently. Look, he's a guy who has a proven track record of stabilizing teams, and that's one thing that Valencia needs, but I don't know about reaching beyond that.
And with that, we are fresh out of time for this edition of Sports Press. I do want to add one little thing that is inspiring for Valencia, and that is Ferran Torres, their sort of young starlet, has agreed to a 5-year deal with the club. So, is it with the club or is it with the Citizens? It says with the Citizens.
City.
Going to Manchester City.
Yeah.
That's inspiring for Pep Guardiola, less so for Los Che.
Exactly.
And with that, we're fresh out of time. So long.